What if the 1960s did not reject bad movies, but punished films that told the truth too early? Hollywood sold clean heroes, easy romance, and comforting endings. Audiences stayed away, studios lost confidence, and several directors paid heavily. Yet decades later, these supposed disasters look bolder, smarter, and more alive than many celebrated hits that once defeated them. Before we uncover these forgotten masterpieces, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Number 37. The Small World of Sammy Lee, 1963. 5 desperate hours are all Sammy Lee has to repair a mistake that could destroy his life. Working as an entertainer inside a faded Soho nightclub, Sammy owes dangerous lenders a large sum after another reckless gambling loss. He races through London, calling friends, inventing promises, bargaining with strangers, and pretending he remains completely in control. The film turns the city into a tightening trap. Every clock, doorway, bus, and telephone reminds Sammy that time is disappearing. One unforgettable sequence follows him through crowded Soho, while cheerful shoppers and tourists move around him, unaware that his future may collapse before sunset. Anthony Newley makes Sammy charming enough to like, yet dishonest enough to distrust. What makes the story especially painful is that Sammy is not facing one sudden disaster. He has built the crisis through years of excuses, small betrayals, and misplaced confidence. Each person he approaches remembers an earlier promise he failed to keep. The humor therefore carries an uncomfortable edge, because every quick joke is another attempt to delay reality. Audiences expecting a light show business comedy were confronted with a bleak character study instead. Its limited commercial appeal reportedly caused a serious loss for its distributor. Today, however, the film is valued for its authentic London locations, nervous energy, an unsentimental portrait of a small-time performer running out of exits. Sammy's world may be small, but the pressure inside it feels enormous. Number 36. The Criminal, 1960. Behind prison walls, professional thief Johnny Banyan behaves like a man who believes every person has a price. After leaving custody, he organizes a carefully planned racecourse robbery. The operation succeeds, but the stolen money becomes a curse when associates, officers, and fellow criminals begin circling him from every direction. Joseph Losey does not present crime as glamorous adventure. The cells are cold, loyalties are temporary, and power changes hands through fear. A striking prison sequence shows Johnny attempting to control a hostile group while guards watch the tension grow. Stanley Baker's hard performance suggests that Johnny's greatest prison is his own pride. The movie also understands that criminal authority depends on performance. Johnny must constantly appear stronger, calmer, and better informed than everyone around him. The moment he reveals uncertainty, rivals sense weakness. Even his relationships outside prison are negotiations, because affection cannot survive in a world where every favor creates a debt. The film disappointed commercially, partly because its brutal mood offered little comfort to audiences expecting a conventional crime thriller. Yet its sharp photography, jazz-influenced atmosphere, and realistic view of British criminal life later earned admiration. Rather than asking whether Johnny can escape, the story asks whether a man built on control can survive once everyone stops obeying him. The answer arrives with the cold force of a locked door, proving that freedom means little when a man carries prison rules inside his own mind. Enjoying these hidden discoveries? Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss another journey into forgotten cinema. Tell us below which overlooked 1960s movie you believe deserves a second life. Number 35. A High Wind in Jamaica, 1965. Nothing about this adventure remains innocent for long. After a hurricane damages their Jamaican home, several British children are sent by ship to England. Pirates capture the vessel, but the children react with curiosity instead of terror, slowly turning the pirates' organized world into confusion. Anthony Quinn plays Captain Chavez as a man who expects danger from soldiers, storms, and rival crews, not from unpredictable children. One of the film's most disturbing moments comes when young Emily becomes involved in a sailor's fatal fall. She barely understands what has happened, yet the adults desperately search for someone to blame. The story's boldest decision is refusing to make childhood either pure or evil. The children imitate adult behavior without grasping its meaning. They play games during dangerous situations, form sudden loyalties, and forget frightening events with a speed that unsettles the grown-ups. Chavez gradually realizes that he cannot apply ordinary rules to passengers who do not understand consequences. The unusual mixture of childhood adventure and moral darkness confused viewers. Families expecting cheerful entertainment found something unsettling, while adult audiences may have dismissed it as a children's story. Its box office performance was disappointing despite strong production values and an impressive cast. Later viewers recognized a daring examination of innocence. The children are not tiny saints or villains. They are unfinished people whose actions can still cause irreversible damage. That makes the apparently cheerful final scenes far more troubling than any ordinary pirate battle, because the adults must live with memories the children may barely carry. Number 34. The Deadly Affair, 1967. A quiet government employee apparently takes his own life, but intelligence officer Charles Dobbs refuses to accept the easy explanation. Following a trail through London, he discovers hidden relationships, divided loyalties, and a possible spy operating dangerously close to home. James Mason plays Dobbs without heroic confidence. He is tired, emotionally wounded, and painfully aware that his own marriage is collapsing while he investigates the secrets of others. The suspense grows through conversations rather than explosions. Its most memorable sequence unfolds inside a theater, where performance and reality begin merging as Dobbs closes in on the truth. The London surrounding him is neither fashionable nor romantic. Offices feel stale, streets seem damp, and private rooms contain the uncomfortable remains of long relationships. Dobbs studies witnesses with patience because he understands that betrayal rarely announces itself dramatically. It appears through a hesitation, an unnecessary detail, or a silence that lasts 1 second too long. Although based on a John le Carré novel, the film arrived without the familiar name of the author's famous spy, George Smiley, because another studio controlled that character. Its serious mood and unglamorous hero also made it difficult to sell during the height of colorful spy adventures. What once seemed slow now feels intelligent and controlled. The gloomy streets, uneasy silences, and Mason's deeply human performance reveal espionage as emotional exhaustion rather than fantasy. This is not a story about saving the world. It is about discovering how much dishonesty one person can endure before trust becomes impossible. Number 33. The Night of the Generals, 1967. 3 powerful German generals become suspects when an investigator connects them to a terrible crime committed in wartime Warsaw. Major Grau follows the evidence even as military leaders treat his investigation as an embarrassing distraction from supposedly more important matters. Peter O'Toole creates an unforgettable General Tanz, a disciplined officer whose polished appearance hides frightening instability. One famous scene places Tanz before modern paintings labeled unacceptable by the regime. His face tightens as color and disorder seem to attack his need for control. Without revealing anything directly, the scene tells us what kind of mind is hiding beneath the uniform. The mystery stretches across years because rank repeatedly protects the suspects. Grau understands that evidence is not enough when institutions fear scandal more than wrongdoing. Every promotion, transfer, and change in political power allows the truth to be delayed. The investigation therefore becomes a battle against official memory as much as against one guilty individual. The expensive international production earned disappointing returns and confused viewers expecting either a traditional war epic or a straightforward detective story. Instead, it moved between wartime Europe and later investigations, combining political history with psychological suspense. Over time, its unusual structure became one of its strengths. The mystery is not merely about identifying a guilty man. It asks how institutions protect powerful people when admitting the truth would damage everyone above them. Omar Sharif's determined investigator gives the story its conscience, while O'Toole turns military perfection into something deeply unsettling. Number 32. The Victors, 1963. Victory rarely looks triumphant in this enormous, bitter war drama. Following several American soldiers across Europe, the story moves from battlefield danger to liberated towns, broken romances, and moral choices that become harder as the official victory approaches. Director Carl Foreman avoids giving the audience one simple hero. Instead, each soldier experiences a different kind of loss. The film's most famous sequence shows a condemned serviceman being led toward punishment while a cheerful Christmas recording plays nearby. The contrast between holiday warmth and military discipline creates an image more haunting than a conventional battle. The episodic structure allows the film to examine what happens after the shooting stops in one town but continues somewhere else. Soldiers meet civilians who have survived occupation, women who trade affection for security, and officers determined to preserve order at any human cost. Nobody moves through Europe without collecting memories that will follow him home. Its length, changing characters, and anti-triumphant message made the production difficult to market. The film performed poorly, disappeared from regular circulation, and was often shown only in shortened versions. Audiences celebrating familiar wartime heroism were not prepared for a movie suggesting that even the winning side could lose part of its humanity. Seen again, its wide canvas feels bold rather than unfocused. The soldiers survive one danger only to carry invisible damage into the next country. By the end, The title sounds almost sarcastic. These men may belong to the victorious army, but very few appear to have truly won. Number 31. The Warlord, 1965. Far from the colorful castles of traditional medieval adventures, a Norman knight arrives at a lonely coastal settlement surrounded by marshland. Chrysagon is ordered to protect the villagers from raiders, but his growing attraction to a local woman places him against the customs of the people he is supposed to defend. Charlton Heston gives the knight unusual sadness. Chrysagon can command soldiers, yet he cannot control the consequences of his own desire. The great siege sequence turns the stone tower into a desperate last defense as attackers rise from the mist and every personal conflict becomes part of the battle. The village does not exist merely as background. Its people possess beliefs and customs older than the occupying warriors, and they recognize that military protection can quickly become ownership. Chrysagon's mistake is believing that power gives him the right to interpret tradition for his own benefit. His private decision therefore becomes a political wound. Studio interference and editing weakened the director's intended version, while audiences expecting a heroic spectacle received a somber tragedy. Its earnings reportedly failed to match its substantial cost, pushing the film into years of neglect. Its strength now lies in the very qualities that once made it difficult. The muddy landscape feels lived in, the religious beliefs are taken seriously, and victory never erases the damage caused by power. Rather than romanticizing the past, the film shows a world where duty, love, possession, and conquest become dangerously mixed. Number 30. The Fugitive Kind, 1960. Carrying a guitar and wearing a snakeskin jacket, wandering musician Val Xavier enters a southern town hoping to leave his troubled past behind. He finds work in a store run by Lady Torrance, whose cruel husband controls both her business and her life. Marlon Brando makes Val quiet, watchful, and strangely vulnerable, while Anna Magnani turns Lady into a woman awakening after years of disappointment. Their connection develops slowly beneath the suspicion of the town. A celebrated scene has Val explain his snakeskin jacket as a symbol of individuality, but his confidence sounds partly like an act he performs to avoid being trapped. The store becomes a place where desire, resentment, and memory gather after dark. Lady dreams of opening a private space filled with music and light, something untouched by her husband's bitterness. Val appears to offer escape, yet he is also a man who has survived by leaving whenever commitment becomes dangerous. The film was a major commercial disappointment. Its theatrical dialogue, heavy symbolism, and emotional intensity felt unfashionable beside faster, more colorful entertainment. Brando's career was also passing through a difficult period, making the failure seem like further proof that his early brilliance had faded. Today, the performances look fearless. The movie treats loneliness like physical heat pressing against every room. Val believes movement keeps him free, yet the story shows that some towns do not allow outsiders to leave unchanged, especially when their presence awakens hopes powerful people need to destroy. Number 29. The Intruder, 1962. A smiling stranger arrives in a southern town just as a local school prepares to integrate. Calling himself Adam Kramer, he claims to defend tradition, but his real talent is turning fear into public anger. William Shatner plays Kramer with disturbing charm. He studies each person, discovers what they resent, and gives that resentment a respectable-sounding voice. The defining scene is his public speech, where ordinary citizens slowly change into an aggressive crowd. Nothing supernatural happens. People simply surrender their judgment to a confident performer. Kramer's strategy depends on making every listener feel personally threatened. He invents urgency, flatters local pride, and presents cruelty as self-defense. The film carefully shows that his power would disappear without cooperation from respectable citizens who prefer his simple lies to difficult change. He is an outsider, but the anger he uses already lives inside the town. Roger Corman expected controversy, but believed the subject mattered. Instead, many theaters refused the picture, protests followed screenings, and the release was quickly reduced. It became one of the rare Corman productions that failed to return its cost. That failure now makes the film even more important. It understood how a manipulator can enter a divided community, invent an enemy, and make neighbors believe they are defending themselves. Shatner's performance is far removed from the heroic role that later made him famous. Kramer does not create hatred from nothing. He notices what is already present and gives it permission to speak. Number 28. The Loneliness of the Long-Distance Runner, 1962. Running becomes an act of rebellion for Colin Smith, an angry young man sent to a detention institution after committing a robbery. The governor discovers Colin's athletic ability and trains him to win an important race that will improve the institution's reputation. Tom Courtenay reveals Colin's memories through sharp flashes of family poverty, frustration, and reckless freedom. During the final race, he easily pulls ahead of his privileged opponent. Then, with victory only steps away, Colin stops. The governor watches helplessly as the young runner chooses personal defeat over becoming somebody else's success story. The training initially appears to offer Colin special treatment, open air, and temporary escape from institutional routine. Yet he recognizes that the governor values him only as a symbol. A victory will allow officials to praise reform without understanding the anger, class pressure, and hopelessness that shaped him. The film was critically respected but commercially disappointing. Its working-class anger, fragmented storytelling, and refusal to provide an inspiring sporting finish made it a difficult attraction for mainstream audiences. Its ending has since become one of British cinema's great acts of resistance. Colin cannot defeat the entire system, but he can refuse to perform for it. The decision costs him comfort and approval, yet preserves the only thing he believes still belongs to him, his right to decide where his own feet will carry him, even when that choice looks like failure to everyone watching. Number 27. The Americanization of Emily, 1964. Cowardice becomes strangely heroic in this sharp wartime satire. Lieutenant Commander Charlie Madison survives by making himself useful to senior officers. He finds luxury items, arranges parties, solves embarrassing problems, and proudly admits that staying alive matters more to him than winning medals. His comfortable arrangement changes when an emotionally unstable admiral decides the Navy needs a publicity victory. Charlie is ordered to become the first American serviceman photographed reaching the shore during the Normandy invasion. The assignment is not designed around military necessity. It is designed around creating an image that newspapers can celebrate. At the same time, Charlie falls for Emily Barham, an English widow whose family has paid a terrible price in war. Emily initially dislikes his open cowardice because she has been taught to respect sacrifice. Charlie, however, argues that societies continue creating wars because they transform the fallen into glorious symbols instead of admitting that their deaths were tragic failures. The graveyard conversation remains the film's most debated scene. James Garner delivers Charlie's argument with humor, fear, and controlled fury, while Julie Andrews responds as someone who cannot easily separate bravery from grief. Their romance works because neither character can remain comfortable inside a simple position. Audiences expecting either cheerful romance or patriotic adventure were startled by a movie openly questioning the language of heroism. It disappointed commercially despite respected performances. Its argument has only grown sharper. Charlie may be selfish, but the institutions surrounding him are more dishonest. They will manufacture a hero, rearrange events, and celebrate a death if it creates the correct headline. The film leaves us asking whether society honors courage or merely needs courageous people to keep accepting impossible orders. Number 26. Bunny Lake is Missing, 1965. An ordinary first day at school becomes a nightmare when Ann Lake returns to collect her young daughter, Bunny, and discovers that nobody remembers seeing the child. There is no registration record, no teacher who met her, and no physical proof that Bunny ever entered the building. Inspector Newhouse begins searching, but every new clue creates doubts about Ann herself. Her protective brother Stephen behaves strangely, while memories of Anne's childhood suggest that Bunny may once have been an imaginary companion. Carol Lindley makes Anne's panic feel immediate, and Laurence Olivier gives the investigator a calm intelligence that never becomes needlessly cruel. Otto Preminger fills the film with unsettling objects: empty classrooms, recorded voices, damaged dolls, unanswered telephones, and rooms that appear to hold memories. A visit to an eccentric doll repairer becomes especially uncomfortable because childhood objects are treated as if they possess private histories. The ordinary world begins looking like evidence in a trial Anne does not understand. The climax involving Bunny's belongings in a dangerous children's game remains one of the decade's strangest suspense sequences. Its power comes from the contrast between playful movements and the adult obsession controlling them. What should appear innocent becomes unbearable because the audience finally understands what is at risk. The movie failed to attract a large audience. Its advertising made it resemble a sensational mystery, while the actual film moved through psychological uncertainty and unhealthy family attachment. Modern viewers are better prepared for its shifting reality. The question is not simply where Bunny has gone. It is whether a woman can prove the existence of someone she loves when every official record says that person was never there. The film turns administrative confusion into a frightening attack on identity itself. Number 25. The President's Analyst, 1967. Knowing the president's private worries sounds like the most important job in America. For psychiatrist Sidney Schaefer, it quickly becomes the most dangerous. After being chosen to advise the president, Sidney is placed under constant protection and expected to remain available at every hour. The pressure destroys his ability to relax, He begins studying strangers, checking rooms, and wondering whether even his closest relationships are being observed. When he finally escapes, intelligence agencies from several countries begin chasing him, each hoping to obtain the secrets locked inside his mind. James Coburn moves effortlessly between relaxed comedy and genuine panic. The film's wildest idea involves a telephone corporation that dreams of connecting citizens directly to its network. Company representatives describe this invasion as convenience, efficiency, and national progress. What once looked like absurd science fiction now feels surprisingly close to modern fears about surveillance, personal data, and companies knowing more about citizens than governments do. The final journey through the corporation's hidden operation turns clean corporate planning into comic horror. Sydney discovers that the organization does not need to threaten people openly. It simply wants everyone connected, measurable, reachable, and unable to exist outside its system. The studio reportedly altered references to real agencies, and the film received an uncertain release. Its mixture of political satire, spy parody, and technological warning confused audiences, leading to disappointing business. Later viewers transformed it into a cult favorite. Beneath the jokes is a serious idea. Anyone trusted with powerful secrets eventually becomes a prisoner of those who want them. Sydney's problem is not that he has become paranoid. It is that nearly everyone truly is following him, and several of them insist they are doing it for his protection. Number 24, Pretty Poison, 1968. Fantasy becomes dangerous when Dennis Pitt, a troubled young man recently released from an institution, meets apparently innocent teenager Sue-Ann Stepanek. Hoping to impress her, Dennis claims he is a secret agent carrying out missions against enemy targets. At first, Sue-Ann seems delighted by the game. She follows Dennis to a local factory, where he pretends they must sabotage an industrial operation. The famous turning point arrives when the fantasy produces real consequences, and Dennis discovers that Sue-Ann is far less innocent than he imagined. Anthony Perkins uses the nervous quality audiences already associated with him, but gives Dennis unexpected tenderness. His lies are not designed only to control others. They allow him to become a more exciting person than the frightened outsider he believes himself to be. Tuesday Weld is even more surprising, moving from cheerful curiosity to cold command without losing her pleasant smile. The story becomes a cruel reversal. Dennis understands fantasy and occasionally recognizes when it has gone too far. Sue-Ann understands reality perfectly, including how easily his history can make him responsible for her decisions. Every attempt he makes to explain the truth sounds exactly like another one of his invented missions. The studio reportedly lacked confidence in the picture, re-edited it, delayed it, and finally released it with little support. Poor ticket sales appeared to justify that decision, but enthusiastic critics soon began rescuing its reputation. Today, the film feels like a dark reversal of the romantic outlaw story. Dennis creates imaginary danger because ordinary life disappoints him. Sue-Ann does not need imagination. She simply recognizes how his stories can protect her. By the time Dennis becomes honest, honesty is the one performance nobody will accept from him. Number 23, The Gypsy Moths, 1969. Three traveling parachutists arrive in a quiet Kansas town to perform dangerous aerial stunts during a holiday celebration. Beneath the excitement, each man is searching for something that life on the ground cannot provide. Mike Reddig is the oldest and most distant member of the group. Malcolm seeks a place where he might finally belong, while young Joe still sees the dangerous profession as a path toward excitement. Staying with a local family brings their private fears into the open, especially when Mike forms a connection with Elizabeth, a woman equally trapped by routine. The aerial photography gives the film its most extraordinary images. Bodies fall through enormous spaces while crowds below reduce danger to entertainment. During the climactic cape jump, Mike drops with fabric stretched between his arms, appearing almost free from gravity. The beauty of the moment is inseparable from the knowledge that one mistake cannot be corrected. Burt Lancaster's physical confidence makes Mike's sadness more difficult to read. He looks like a man capable of surviving anything, yet his relationship with danger suggests that survival may no longer satisfy him. Deborah Kerr gives Elizabeth a quieter desperation. She is drawn not simply to Mike, but to the possibility of stepping outside the life everyone assumes she accepts. Despite Lancaster, Gene Hackman, and Kerr leading the cast, the film earned modest returns and quickly disappeared. Viewers expecting a straightforward adventure received a patient meditation on age, risk, and disappointment. Its sadness now feels deeply honest. The parachutists entertain crowds by appearing fearless, but every jump expresses a different need. One wants applause, another wants escape, and one may be testing whether he still cares about landing. Number 22, The Royal Hunt of the Sun, 1969. Gold drives Spanish commander Francisco Pizarro across the mountains of Peru, but his encounter with Inca ruler Atahualpa becomes more than a military conquest. Pizarro arrives as an aging man, desperate to prove that his brutal life has meaning. Atahualpa appears to possess the certainty and spiritual power that Pizarro lacks. Robert Shaw plays the conqueror as both ruthless and exhausted. Christopher Plummer's Atahualpa is proud, playful, theatrical, and absolutely convinced of his divine place in the universe. Their conversations turn a historical epic into an intimate struggle between belief and emptiness. Pizarro's soldiers capture the ruler through deception and demand a room filled with treasure. Gold begins arriving from across the empire, creating mountains of wealth inside a place where promises are becoming worthless. The Spanish claim religion, law, and royal authority support their actions, yet fear repeatedly decides what they will do. The final sequence contains the film's most powerful image. After Atahualpa's fate has been decided, Pizarro waits for the rising sun, hoping the ruler's promise of renewal might somehow be true. As daylight arrives without the miracle he desperately needs, political victory becomes personal defeat. The stylized acting and theatrical design made the production difficult for mass audiences. Instead of offering continuous battles, it asks viewers to watch two powerful men slowly dismantle each other's beliefs. The film consequently found little commercial attention. Its ambition now seems remarkable. Conquest is not presented as a simple clash between civilization and savagery. Both societies contain beauty, cruelty, faith, and greed. Pizarro wins the empire he was sent to capture, yet destroys the one possibility that might have saved him from believing his entire life was empty. Number 21. The Bed-Sitting Room, 1969. After a war lasting only minutes, the remaining population of Britain attempts to continue ordinary life among enormous piles of rubble. Trains run without clear destinations, officials repeat meaningless announcements, and survivors begin changing into furniture and household objects. The central joke is also the central horror. Lord Fortnum becomes convinced that he is transforming into a bed-sitting room. Instead of treating this as impossible, everyone begins measuring him and discussing where his windows should be. Elsewhere, a policeman floats above the ruins in a balloon, shouting instructions nobody needs. Richard Lester builds the film from strange sketches, but the nonsense hides a serious view of society. Institutions survive even when their purpose has vanished. Titles, manners, legal procedures, and class divisions remain important to characters who barely have a world left to organize. The survivors fear disorder more than extinction because disorder would force them to invent new ways of living. One of the cleverest recurring ideas involves authorities searching for a missing population that may no longer exist. Announcements continue, committees operate, and people wait for instructions from systems that have nothing useful to say. The old national voice remains confident, even while the nation itself has become scattered debris. The production was a box office disaster and received confused reactions. Its humor was too bleak for audiences seeking escapism and too absurd for viewers expecting realistic science fiction. Seen today, the empty landscapes and cheerful official voices feel painfully intelligent. The film does not ask whether humanity can rebuild after catastrophe. It asks whether rebuilding the same foolish systems would count as survival. Its characters cling to routine because admitting reality would require accepting that the old world was never as sensible as they believed. Number 20. Castle Keep, 1969. A wounded American unit reaches a beautiful Belgian castle during the final months of the Second World War. Major Falconer intends to use the building as a defensive position, even though its owner is desperate to protect the priceless art, books, and architecture stored inside. Nothing behaves like a normal war film. One soldier becomes fascinated by a bakery, another writes about the group as though their lives are already history, and the castle's owner worries that his family line will disappear. Outside, enemy forces approach with tanks in overwhelming numbers. The men respond to approaching danger in different ways. Some search for pleasure, some retreat into private theories, and others obey Falconer because military purpose is easier than uncertainty. The castle becomes a temporary world where centuries of European history meet soldiers who may not survive the week. The final battle is both spectacular and mournful. Soldiers fire from rooms filled with paintings and ancient books, while the castle burns around objects that have survived earlier wars. Victory and destruction become impossible to separate. Falconer can defend the position only by helping ruin the very civilization his army claims to be rescuing. Its surreal tone and sudden changes between comedy, philosophy, romance, and violence baffled many viewers. The production slipped through theaters without becoming either a popular action movie or a respected prestige success. Modern audiences can see the method behind the madness. Every character chooses something to preserve: art, duty, love, reputation, memory, or simple survival. By the end, The ruins suggest that war rarely protects anything without first changing it forever. The castle remains valuable because generations built upon it, yet one modern battle can reduce that accumulated meaning to smoke before morning. Number 19. Boom, 1968. High above the Mediterranean, wealthy Flora Goforth rules an isolated estate, while illness quietly reduces the time she has left. She insults servants, dictates her memories, changes clothes constantly, and behaves as though money can command the world to remain outside her bedroom. Then a mysterious poet named Chris Flanders climbs onto the property. Local gossip calls him an angel of death because he appears near wealthy women shortly before they die. Flora responds with suspicion, attraction, mockery, and anger, refusing to admit that his presence may represent something she cannot purchase or dismiss. Elizabeth Taylor turns every robe, demand, and insult into theatrical armor. Richard Burton answers her force with calm stillness. Their cliffside conversations, surrounded by blinding sunlight and endless sea, make the luxurious home feel like the edge of the world. Noelle Coward arrives as the Witch of Capri, adding another layer of performance and cruel observation. Flora's autobiography is central to her defense, yet even her memories sound like expensive rooms arranged to impress visitors. Chris keeps asking questions that cannot be answered through jewelry, servants, or dramatic stories. The production became a notorious commercial failure. Critics mocked its excess, and audiences struggled with dialogue adapted from Tennessee Williams's symbolic stage writing. Time has been kinder. The artificial costumes, strange pauses, and emotional explosions now appear deliberately operatic. Flora has spent her life building a magnificent performance called Flora Goforth. Chris does not arrive to destroy it. He simply waits until she can no longer pretend the performance will continue forever. Once treated as glamorous nonsense, the film has become a treasured cult object whose excess is inseparable from its sadness. Number 18. Privilege, 1967. Pop singer Stephen Shorter appears to be the most powerful young man in Britain. Crowds scream his name, television follows his movements, and companies place his face on products. In reality, every emotion he displays has been carefully planned by people who own his image. Managers first market Stephen as a rebellious prisoner, allowing young fans to express anger through him. Later, government, business, and religious authorities reshape him into a symbol of obedience. The same performer sold as dangerous can be repackaged as respectable because his personality is only another costume selected by a committee. The most famous sequence takes place during a giant rally, where music, nationalism, advertising, and religious ceremony become one overwhelming performance. Thousands repeat gestures together while Stephen stands at the center like a modern saint. The scene is colorful and exciting, yet Peter Watkins films it with the cold attention of someone documenting a political machine. Paul Jones keeps Stephen strangely empty. The singer has millions of admirers but almost no private identity. Only artist Vanessa Ritchie notices that the cheerful national symbol is a lonely man exhausted by pretending. Her portrait attempts to capture the person hidden beneath the official face. The satire proved too uncomfortable for comfortable release. Its documentary style and attack on media manipulation made it hard to promote, and the film soon became difficult to see. Its warnings now look astonishingly modern. Stephen is not famous because people know him. He is famous because organizations have studied what the public needs him to represent. When he finally speaks honestly, the same system that manufactured his popularity erases it. The film's forgotten status almost proves its argument. Attention can be directed, controlled, and withdrawn with terrifying speed. Number 17. The Shooting, 1966. A former bounty hunter returns to a remote mining camp and discovers that one man has died while another has disappeared. Before he can understand what happened, a mysterious woman offers him money to guide her across the desert. She refuses to explain where they are going or whom she is following. Another gunman soon appears at a distance, silently pushing the group forward. The desert becomes less like a landscape and more like a dream, where guilt has taken physical form. Warren Oates gives the central performance a tired intelligence. He knows the woman is hiding something, but curiosity and responsibility prevent him from abandoning her. Will Hutchins supplies nervous humor as Coley, a companion whose innocence seems increasingly dangerous. Jack Nicholson's black-clad pursuer feels less like an ordinary villain than an approaching judgment. Monty Hellman removes familiar landmarks from the Western. Towns, sheriffs, ranches, and clear missions disappear. The riders have only heat, exhaustion, uncertain directions, and the feeling that something ahead already knows they are coming. Even simple questions produce evasive answers. The climax arrives through broken movement and stretched time. Riders charge toward one another, identities become uncertain, and the final revelation answers the mystery while making the journey stranger. The film barely received a proper American theatrical release and circulated mainly through television and foreign markets. That neglect helped create its cult reputation. There is no heroic community or clean victory. The characters ride because something unfinished is waiting ahead. By turning a familiar genre into an existential puzzle, the movie became one of the decade's quiet revolutions. Its final image does not close the story so much as trap everyone inside the instant when violence, memory, and identity become impossible to separate. Number 16. Ride in the Whirlwind, 1966. Three cowboys looking for shelter make the mistake of spending a night with strangers who are actually wanted outlaws. When a posse surrounds the cabin, the innocent travelers are immediately assumed to belong to the gang. The misunderstanding cannot be corrected because nobody is interested in asking questions. Smoke, gunfire, and confusion force the cowboys to escape into rough country, where they become hunted men without knowing exactly what crime they are supposed to have committed. The cabin siege provides the film's central burst of tension. Instead of glorious action, the sequence feels cramped and desperate. Men fire through walls they cannot see beyond, while the innocent visitors realize that surviving the attack will make them look even guiltier. Every defensive action strengthens the false story the posse already believes. Jack Nicholson, Cameron Mitchell, and Millie Perkins give the film a quiet human quality. The characters speak plainly, wait for long periods, and make practical decisions without turning themselves into legends. When the fugitives seek help at a small farm, ordinary domestic routines briefly offer safety, yet their presence immediately places another family in danger. Like its companion production The Shooting, the film received almost no meaningful American theatrical distribution, although it attracted attention abroad. Today, its simplicity feels radical. The Western hero usually controls his identity through courage and reputation. Here, identity belongs to the armed group doing the chasing. Once the posse calls a man an outlaw, every attempt to survive becomes further evidence against him. The whirlwind of the title is not merely physical danger. It is the speed with which a false story becomes accepted truth, leaving innocent men no legal path back into ordinary life. Number 15. The Rain People, 1969. Without warning, pregnant housewife Natalie Ravenna leaves her sleeping husband and begins driving across America. She does not have a destination. She only knows that becoming a mother has made her fear her individual life is disappearing. On the road, she picks up a gentle former football player called Killer, whose brain injury has left him dependent on others. Natalie first treats him as a temporary companion, but his trust places a responsibility upon her that she is not prepared to accept. Later, she meets Gordon, a lonely patrolman carrying grief and anger of his own. Francis Ford Coppola filmed the story across real locations, allowing the journey to feel uncertain and unfinished. Telephone conversations with Natalie's husband reveal that escape has not freed her from guilt. Every mile creates additional choices, but none gives her the simple independence she imagined while leaving home. A painful basketball sequence reveals Killer's past ability and present limitations without reducing him to a symbol. James Caan makes his innocence both comforting and frightening because Natalie knows he cannot simply be abandoned. The film performed poorly and initially raised doubts about Coppola's commercial future. Its quiet rhythm and drifting structure offered none of the excitement associated with a road movie. Natalie's escape is neither celebrated nor condemned. She wants freedom, yet every person she meets needs something from her. The open road promises limitless choice, but the film keeps asking whether freedom remains freedom when another vulnerable person must pay for it. By the final tragedy, movement no longer looks like liberation. Number 14. The Charge of the Light Brigade, 1968. Patriotism is stripped of its shine in this angry recreation of the Crimean War. Young Officer Nolan enters a military world controlled by status, family connections, and commanders more concerned with personal pride than human consequences. The story moves toward the famous cavalry charge, but director Tony Richardson refuses to treat it as a simple celebration of courage. Animated sequences imitate Victorian political cartoons, exposing cheerful propaganda surrounding hunger, disease, and official incompetence. Between them, officers argue over honor while ordinary soldiers endure the cost. David Hemmings plays Nolan as passionate and increasingly frustrated. Trevor Howard's Lord Cardigan and John Gielgud's Lord Raglan appear trapped by class assumptions that remain powerful even when they make no military sense. Orders pass through several people, each protecting rank and reputation, until confusion becomes almost inevitable. The final charge is visually magnificent, yet emotionally devastating. Horses and riders move into the valley, while unclear instructions and wounded pride create a disaster that ceremony will later transform into legend. The soldiers display undeniable courage, but the film refuses to let that courage excuse the leaders who wasted it. The expensive production disappointed at the box office. Viewers expecting traditional heroism were confronted with satire, cruelty, and commanders behaving foolishly. Its reputation has grown because it understands how history is manufactured. The grand uniforms and speeches do not hide incompetence. They make that incompetence possible by persuading everyone that questioning authority would be dishonorable. The movie respects individual bravery while attacking the system that needs brave men to obey before they fully understand where they are being sent. Number 13. The Loved One, 1965. Hollywood's funeral business becomes the setting for one of the decade's strangest comedies. British poet Dennis Barlow travels to Los Angeles after his uncle dies and discovers Whispering Glades, a magnificent cemetery where grief is packaged and sold like luxury entertainment. Dennis becomes fascinated by cosmetician Aimee Thanatogenos, who prepares the deceased according to the company's artificial standards of beauty. At the same time, he secretly works at a pet cemetery run by the energetic Reverend Glenworthy. His divided life pulls him between two businesses, selling comfort through carefully staged illusions. The sets are enormous, the performances deliberately exaggerated, and every polite conversation hides a commercial transaction. One unforgettable sequence transforms a final journey into an absurd space-age promotion, connecting death, advertising, national ambition, and celebrity culture with fearless bad taste. The scene feels ridiculous, but the business logic behind it is perfectly clear. Even a final farewell can become publicity if somebody controls the presentation. The marketing promised something shocking, yet audiences were uncertain whether the film was satire, romance, or grotesque spectacle. Reviews divided sharply, and its theatrical performance disappointed. What appeared uncontrolled now looks wonderfully targeted. The movie attacks an industry that cannot admit death is ordinary. Even Dennis's romance becomes another form of dishonesty because he changes his identity depending on which business surrounds him. Its comedy remains uncomfortable because the world has not moved away from selling perfect images. Whispering Glades merely extends that sales pitch beyond the customer's final breath, promising dignity while quietly calculating what grief can afford. Number 12. The Flight of the Phoenix, 1965. When a transport plane crashes in the Sahara, the survivors face a simple mathematical problem. Their water will disappear long before help is likely to arrive. Arguments quickly divide the group between those who want to wait and those willing to attempt an impossible plan. German engineer Heinrich Dorfmann claims they can build a smaller aircraft from the wreckage. Pilot Frank Towns dislikes his arrogance but has no better solution. As heat, fear, and exhaustion reduce the group, every technical disagreement becomes a struggle over who deserves authority. James Stewart plays Towns as an experienced man forced to accept that experience may no longer be enough. Hardy Kruger makes Dorfmann irritating, brilliant, and frighteningly confident. Richard Attenborough provides the emotional bridge between them, understanding that the survivors need both Dorfmann's calculations and Towns's practical knowledge. Its greatest sequence arrives when the rebuilt engine must start. Each attempt uses precious equipment, and the survivors watch the propeller as though it were deciding whether they deserve another future. The sound of machinery becomes more suspenseful than any approaching enemy. Despite its cast and scale, the film failed commercially during its original release. Its long running time and concentration on argument rather than conventional action limited its immediate appeal. Later generations recognized an exceptional survival drama. The desert is dangerous, but pride is nearly as deadly. Escape becomes possible only when men who dislike one another accept that cooperation does not require friendship. It requires admitting that no single person can survive alone, and that the correct idea may come from the most irritating voice in the group. Number 11. The Hill, 1965. Inside a British military detention camp in North Africa, punishment is represented by an artificial hill built from sand. Prisoners must repeatedly climb it beneath the sun, while guards decide whether exhaustion shows weakness or disobedience. Joe Roberts arrives after striking a superior officer whom he believed was wasting lives. He refuses to accept the camp's cruel logic, bringing him into conflict with Staff Sergeant Williams, a guard who treats humiliation as proof of discipline. Sean Connery removed nearly every trace of his glamorous spy image to play Roberts. His anger is controlled, intelligent, and dangerous because he understands military rules well enough to expose their hypocrisy. Ian Hendry makes Williams frightening not through physical size, but through his need to demonstrate authority in front of others. The hill climbing sequences become increasingly unbearable. Each step is simple, yet repetition turns the slope into a machine designed to break identity. Other prisoners respond through humor, defiance, silence, or collapse. The camp's officers see these reactions as individual failures rather than evidence that the system itself is producing disaster. When the prisoners finally resist, the institution attempts to protect its reputation, instead of admitting what caused the crisis. The film earned strong reviews but never became a major popular success. Its harsh setting, lack of conventional action, and relentless arguments made it difficult entertainment. Today, it stands among Sidney Lumet's strongest works. The story does not suggest that all discipline is wrong. It asks what happens when discipline stops serving justice and begins serving the pride of those enforcing it. The hill exists only because everyone has been ordered to believe climbing it has meaning. Roberts becomes dangerous because he names the emptiness of that belief aloud. Number 10, Mickey 1, 1965. A nightclub comedian runs from Detroit after convincing himself that powerful criminals have marked him for punishment. Reaching Chicago, he changes his name to Mickey 1 and slowly attempts to return to the stage. The problem is that Mickey does not know who is chasing him, what rule he broke, or whether anyone still cares. Every stranger looks like an observer, every audition feels like a trap, and success seems more dangerous than failure, because recognition could expose him. Arthur Penn films the city like a European nightmare. Reflections, empty streets, sudden noises, harsh lights, and unexplained machinery turn ordinary locations into pieces of Mickey's fear. A huge mechanical sculpture appears to carry some private meaning, then its destruction suggests a world capable of building beauty only to tear it apart. Warren Beatty gives Mickey nervous energy without explaining him too clearly. He may be escaping criminals, guilt, ambition, or his own imagination. His comedy routines become tests. Every laugh might mean acceptance, but it might also announce his location to whoever controls the punishment he fears. The unusual production failed with audiences, and many contemporary reviewers considered it confusing. It soon disappeared behind Beatty's more accessible successes. Its fragmentation now seems purposeful. Mickey wants certainty before he acts, but the world refuses to provide it. Performing comedy becomes an act of courage because appearing on stage means accepting that punishment may come. The film turns show business into a modern trial where nobody explains the accusation, and the defendant must decide whether hiding is worse than being found. Its final challenge is brutally simple: live under an invented identity forever, or risk becoming visible without knowing who is watching. Number 9, The Misfits, 1961. Freshly divorced Rosalind Tabor meets aging cowboy Gay Langland in Nevada and is drawn toward his promise of open land and uncomplicated freedom. Their romance joins them with mechanic Guido and struggling rodeo rider Perce, men who appear independent but are quietly being left behind by a changing America. The journey reaches its emotional center when the men capture wild Mustangs to sell for commercial use. Gay treats the hunt as proof that he still belongs to the Old West. Rosalind sees frightened animals being sacrificed to preserve a masculine dream that no longer has a place. Marilyn Monroe gives Rosalind painful sensitivity, while Clark Gable turns Gay's confidence into a defense against age. Montgomery Clift's damaged Perce appears to understand that all of them are misfits pretending movement will prevent loneliness. Even Guido's charm gradually reveals resentment and disappointment. The Mustang sequence remains the film's defining achievement. Wide desert images promise freedom, yet ropes, machines, and exhaustion steadily close around animals and people. Rosalind's protest sounds almost unbearable because nobody else wants to admit what the work has become. The expensive production received mixed reactions and barely recovered its costs. Public attention also became overwhelmed by the fact that it contained the final completed performances of Gable and Monroe. Time revealed something larger than a troubled production. The film mourns a version of America built on restless men, open spaces, and endless reinvention. Gay can release the horses, but he cannot restore the world that made him feel necessary. Rosalind's compassion offers another way to live, yet accepting it requires the men to surrender the identities that once protected them. Their real struggle is not against modern life. It is against the terrifying possibility that the stories they told about freedom have stopped being true. Number 8, One-Eyed Jacks, 1961. Betrayal drives outlaw Rio through years of imprisonment and across the frontier. His former partner, Dad Longworth, escaped with their stolen money and eventually transformed himself into the respected sheriff of Monterey. When Rio finally arrives, revenge appears simple. The situation changes after he becomes involved with Longworth's stepdaughter Louisa and discovers that the respected sheriff remains terrified of his own past. Marlon Brando plays Rio as charming, dangerous, wounded, and often uncertain about what he truly wants. The coastal scenery separates the film from dusty studio westerns. Waves crash beneath cliffs, while characters hide dishonesty behind calm conversation. Rio delays his revenge, partly because he wants Longworth to suffer, and partly because he wants an explanation that could restore meaning to the years he lost. A public punishment ordered by Longworth becomes the story's emotional breaking point. The sheriff claims to defend law, but his violence reveals how badly he needs to destroy the one man who remembers him as a coward. Respectability has not changed Longworth. It has only given his fear legal authority. Brando's only completed film as director became famous for production delays, enormous amounts of footage, and studio interference. The final version was shortened, went over budget, and failed to become the major success needed to justify its cost. Restoration allowed later audiences to appreciate its unusual rhythm and visual beauty. This is less a story of good against evil than two men fighting over which version of their shared past will survive. Rio wants revenge, but he also wants Longworth to admit the betrayal. The sheriff's real fear is not punishment. It is being recognized as the outlaw he successfully taught the town to forget. Number 7. The Leopard. 1963. Political revolution enters the home of Prince Don Fabrizio Celina as forces supporting a united Italy spread across Sicily. The prince understands that the aristocratic world surrounding him is disappearing, even while his family continues behaving as though its privileges are permanent. His ambitious nephew Tancredi adapts quickly, joining the new movement and falling in love with Angelica, the beautiful daughter of a wealthy businessman. Their marriage will connect old status with new money, preserving power by changing its clothing. Burt Lancaster gives the prince enormous dignity without turning him into a simple victim. He recognizes the unfairness of his class, yet mourns the culture, memory, and identity that will vanish with it. Alain Delon makes Tancredi attractive precisely because he understands history as opportunity. The long ballroom sequence is the film's masterpiece. As couples dance beneath chandeliers, the prince walks through rooms filled with younger faces and realizes that he has become an observer at his own historical ending. Celebration continues around a man quietly rehearsing his disappearance. The full Italian production won major recognition, but the shortened English-language version released in America damaged its rhythm and confused viewers. Poorly presented, it seemed like an overlong costume drama rather than an intimate political tragedy. Restored versions revealed its true scale. The film does not argue that the old order deserves survival. It shows how systems protect themselves by absorbing revolution. Tancredi understands that changing everything on the surface may be the best way to keep power exactly where it was. The prince's sadness comes from recognizing that the future will condemn his world while quietly borrowing its methods, manners, and hunger for control. Number 6. Major Dundee, 1965. After an Apache leader attacks a military outpost, ambitious Union officer Amos Dundee gathers an unusual force to pursue him into Mexico. His group includes regular soldiers, civilian recruits, African-American troops, and Confederate prisoners led by Dundee's former friend Benjamin Tyreen. The mission quickly becomes personal. Dundee cares less about official orders than proving himself to a military establishment that has overlooked him. Tyreen agrees to serve only until the campaign ends, creating a temporary alliance held together by pride and an old promise. Charlton Heston makes Dundee commanding but deeply reckless. Richard Harris gives Tyreen elegance, anger, and enough authority to challenge him. Their relationship contains more danger than the enemy they are following, because each man knows exactly where the other's honor can be wounded. The river crossing and later battle sequences show Sam Peckinpah already experimenting with chaotic movement, sudden silence, and exhausted men struggling through landscapes that seem determined to reject them. Yet the quieter scenes matter equally. Discipline weakens, loyalties divide, and the mission continues long after its original purpose has become uncertain. Production problems became legendary. The studio removed material, rearranged scenes, changed the music, and released a version Peckinpah did not approve. Reviews were poor, business disappointed, and the director's reputation suffered. Later restoration could not reconstruct every missing piece, but it revealed the shape of a damaged epic. Dundee's tragedy is not that he lacks courage, it is that courage without judgment becomes another form of vanity. He keeps extending the campaign because returning home would force him to admit it was never truly about duty. The unfinished quality almost suits a story about a commander whose ambition constantly outruns his ability to control what follows. Number 5. Chimes at Midnight, 1965. Sir John Falstaff lives through jokes, stolen meals, unpaid bills, and the belief that his friendship with young Prince Hal will protect him from the future. Hal enjoys the old man's company, but also knows becoming king will require him to leave that disorder behind. Orson Welles combines material from several Shakespeare plays to make Falstaff the emotional center. Instead of presenting him merely as comic relief, Welles shows an aging man who has built an entire philosophy around avoiding responsibility, war, and respectable behavior. The tavern scenes feel warm, crowded, and temporary. Falstaff performs mock ceremonies, insults authority, and imagines that affection can defeat political necessity. Hal laughs with him, yet the audience can sense the prince rehearsing the distance he will eventually need. The Battle of Shrewsbury is the film's most celebrated sequence. Armor becomes crushing metal, mud swallows movement, and heroic combat turns into terrified bodies colliding without order. The editing destroys every romantic idea of medieval warfare, while Falstaff survives through instinct rather than honor. Financing and distribution problems prevented the film from receiving a stable release. Sound issues gave hostile reviewers an easy target, and many audiences rejected it. For years, one of Wells's greatest achievements was difficult to see properly. Restoration transformed its reputation. The grainy faces, deep shadows, and shifting voices feel like part of a remembered world. Falstaff jokes because laughter allows him to postpone the truth. When the newly crowned king rejects him, the heartbreak is not simply personal. An entire age of friendship, freedom, and foolishness is pushed aside by the cold responsibilities of power. Falstaff believed love made him permanent, but monarchy cannot afford to remember every person who helped a prince escape himself. Number 4. Seconds, 1966. Banker Arthur Hamilton appears to possess a successful life, but every achievement feels borrowed from someone else's idea of happiness. A mysterious organization offers him a solution. His old identity will officially die, surgery will give him a new face, and he can begin again as artist Tony Wilson. Rock Hudson's arrival as Tony initially looks like liberation. He receives a beautiful coastal home, new friends, and freedom from ordinary responsibilities. Yet the organization has planned even his spontaneity. The people encouraging him to relax are part of the same system controlling his transformation. The famous grape-stomping sequence surrounds Tony with dancing bodies and wild celebration. He appears briefly free, but the distorted photography makes the happiness feel unstable. Later, a reunion with his former wife reveals that Arthur's unhappiness came partly from his inability to participate in his own life, not merely from the life itself. John Frankenheimer turns offices, operating rooms, and modern houses into parts of one enormous machine. The company does not ask what Arthur wants to become. It supplies a complete identity, then expects him to perform gratitude. Audiences rejected the film, and its appearance at Cannes reportedly produced open hostility. Viewers expecting a glamorous Rock Hudson drama encountered disturbing imagery and an ending without comfort. Its reputation has completely changed. The organization does not sell a second chance. It sells another carefully designed consumer identity. Arthur believes a new face will create a new soul, but the procedure only removes his excuses. The final journey reveals the true price of a system that promises endless beginnings because it has perfected the business of ending unwanted lives. Its horror comes from recognizing that Arthur volunteered, signed the papers, and mistook surrender for freedom. Number 3. The Swimmer, 1968. On a bright summer afternoon, Ned Merrill appears beside a swimming pool wearing nothing but confidence and swimming trunks. Looking across the wealthy neighborhood, he decides he can travel home by swimming through every backyard pool between him and his house. At first, the journey feels playful. Neighbors welcome him, offer drinks, and remember Ned as a successful friend. Gradually, their reactions change. Some appear surprised that he is still behaving as though nothing has happened. Others mention unpaid debts, damaged relationships, and family troubles Ned refuses to recognize. Burt Lancaster's physical strength makes the breakdown more painful. He begins like a mythological hero crossing a private kingdom, but every pool removes another piece of the story he tells about himself. Changes in weather and light suggest that far more than one afternoon may be passing. One revealing encounter occurs at an empty public pool, where Ned is forced to stand without the social protection offered by wealthy friends. Later meetings expose anger, pity, and memories he cannot control. The final arrival at his locked, abandoned home destroys the summer fantasy completely. Confusing marketing and production difficulties contributed to poor ticket sales. Audiences did not know whether they were watching a drama, mystery, or surreal allegory. Number 2. Medium Cool, 1969. Television cameraman John Casellas believes the camera separates him from whatever he records. Accidents, poverty, demonstrations, and private grief become images to capture rather than experiences demanding his involvement. That professional distance begins collapsing after he learns his station has been sharing filmed material with authorities. His growing relationship with Appalachian mother Eileen and her son Harold also pulls him toward lives normally reduced to brief television reports. Director Haskell Wexler places fictional characters inside real events surrounding the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. The most famous sequence follows Eileen through streets filled with actual protesters, police activity, smoke, shouting, and confusion. The actors remain in character while history moves unpredictably around them. The mixture creates constant uncertainty. We know Eileen's search belongs to a written story, yet the crowd around her is responding to real pressure. A warning heard during filming reminds everyone that the danger is not controlled by the production. The barrier between observer and participant finally disappears. This documentary fiction approach made the movie politically explosive. Its restrictive rating, controversial subject, and difficult release prevented it from reaching the audience its technical achievement deserved. Modern viewers can see how far ahead it was. The film questions whether recording suffering creates understanding or merely turns pain into content. John begins convinced that the lens protects him. By the end, the camera itself is part of the event and can no longer claim innocence. The audience is implicated too. We watch real fear inside a fictional structure and must decide whether knowing the difference changes our responsibility. In a world where nearly every public crisis is instantly recorded, that question has become more urgent, not less. Number 1. Peeping Tom, 1960. A camera moves through a London street, approaches a woman, and quietly records the final moments of an encounter. From its opening scene, the film forces viewers to recognize that looking can become a form of participation. Mark Lewis works as a camera operator while privately studying fear. His childhood was controlled by a psychologist father who filmed experiments involving surprise and terror, teaching Mark to understand life through a lens instead of ordinary human contact. As an adult, he remains gentle and awkward in conversation, especially with neighbor Helen, but his secret filmmaking reveals the damage beneath that politeness. Carl Boehm makes Mark frightening without removing his humanity. Anna Massey's warmth as Helen creates the possibility that he might form a real connection, making every return to his private screening room more tragic. Mark does not simply preserve images. He watches them repeatedly, trying to master emotions he cannot experience safely. The opening point-of-view sequence and later scenes of Mark studying his recordings shattered the distance audiences expected from thrillers. Critics attacked the movie with extraordinary anger. Its release collapsed, it became difficult to see, and director Michael Powell's British career suffered lasting damage. Years later, filmmakers and preservationists helped restore its reputation. It is now recognized as a landmark examination of cinema itself. Mark uses the camera to control fear, but the film turns that camera toward us. We came to watch suspense, and Powell quietly asks what pleasure we expected from looking. That question buried the film in 1960 and made it a masterpiece forever. The greatest shock is not hidden inside Mark's equipment. It is the moment the audience realizes that his need to watch has been mirrored by our own. These films prove that box office numbers are never a final judgment. A weak campaign, a nervous studio, one harsh review, or an audience expecting the wrong experience can bury genuine art for decades. Now the verdict belongs to us. Which forgotten flop deserves the greatest comeback, and which entry surprised you most? Leave your choice below. Share this countdown with another classic film fan, and remember, cinema's greatest masterpieces are sometimes the films history nearly threw away.